I'm Paul Hoffschmidt, founder and CEO of Alpha Sophia, and this week I'm joined by Jared Hook, VP of Business Development at Gateway Services. Jared, thanks for joining us today. Yeah, great to have you on the pod. Maybe let's start right in by hearing a little bit about your journey. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in your current role.
Yeah, Paul, thank you very much for having me today. Really looking forward to this. And obviously, we've had a lot of conversations over really the last year at this point in time. So happy 2025 to you and the rest of the team over at Alpha Sophia. A little bit about myself, Jared Hook. I'm from Michigan, in the United States. I've been in the medtech industry for about just over 12 years now. I think my journey's been interesting for sure. I've had a lot of different roles in a few different companies, and I started my journey with Stryker, and was there for just over actually a day over 8 years, which is crazy. Went off over to Stryker and held various roles, or sorry, I was at Stryker and then Medtronic. Went off from various roles at Stryker, from sales to operations to marketing, and went back into sales with Medtronic. From there, I shifted over to a smaller medical devices company, in more of the supplier and vendor side, and we serviced more of the global services. And from a capital equipment standpoint, was with them for just under a year, and then I joined Gateway. So Gateway came at a time in my life where I was not necessarily lost, but I wanted something different from a medical device standpoint. And it's something that medical devices is something I'm really passionate about. And it's really interesting because I'm a person that likes and has been exposed to a lot of different specialties in the medical device arena.
Mm.
And this position in this company really allows me to really go and work and partner with a lot of different niche type of environments, and specialties across the board in the surgical or even non-surgical space. You can think about it from an orthopedics, an endoscopy perspective. You can think about it from more of your pre-hospital, your transportation type of things, your EMS, and even kind of your post-surgical and the acute care. So there's a lot of different spaces that Gateway partners with, and the med tech space is a large ecosystem. I'll tell
Mm.
you that much. And there's a lot at your fingertips, and that's something that I really love and that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. It's quite interesting. You already mentioned that you worked in marketing roles, you worked in more sales roles, and
Yep.
I think, I mean, we can talk about that later, but marketing and sales are also getting closer and closer together, I think, and they have to work more and more in not like isolated pillars, but more like in a joint function where the one is cross pollinating the work of the other. But we can touch that later. Maybe let's talk a little bit about gateway services at the beginning, what
Yep.
you're doing there, because you already touched that it brings together many of your different experience points
Yep.
from your time in that industry. How would you explain to a layperson what gateway services actually does?
It's a really good question. So Gateway Services, we're a niche medical devices engineering services company. So when you think about from an engineering perspective, it encapsulates a lot, whether it's your R&D work, your manufacturing work, your M&A and your integration work, to even engineering and sustainment work. So there's a lot of different things, and it impacts a lot of different areas, to that downstream effort from marketing and sales as well. So I kind of have that interesting tie-in with each of those impacts. But so Gateway, we partner with our customers, both large and small, in a lot of different areas. We're pretty much we are all project specific. So really, it's high priority project based clientels that we're working with, and that could be from the R&D side. So
Mm.
we're partnering with customers, large and small, on R&D efforts to develop the next generation of products, new generation, or even a brand new product line that they're developing. We're partnering from a manufacturing perspective with some of our customers on product transfers. They're simply
Mm.
making a transformation for their business, whether it's cost savings, initiatives, or they lost a supplier, and they're transporting one product being developed in one area or manufactured in one area, and they're going to transport it, and begin doing the manufacturing for another. So our
Yeah.
team of engineers are working with them to make sure that's going efficiently, and following all the quality, and the regulations that are imposed on these large companies, that they have to follow, right? And then you can even think about it from an M&A perspective, right?
Mm.
M&A is a hot topic. I mean, if you follow Gateway on LinkedIn, we post about every M&A deal that pretty much happens across the board, and we help on a lot of the DHF integration, integrating those companies on a back end and from an engineering side
Mm.
into that new company. There's a lot of examples out there. And really why we're doing this is there's two main reasons that we're partnering, and we'll probably get into it a little bit later on the why, but there's two main reasons where we come in. So there's capacity, and there's two, capabilities. So
Mm.
from a capacity perspective, we're working with companies that lack bandwidth. Simply, they lack bandwidth, and they don't have the support, whether because of the amount of employees that they have from a full-time perspective, and they simply need more manpower for that
Mm.
project to get it done. I mean, a lot of these teams and these individuals are working on a lot of different things, and they have a big cost savings initiative, or a big R&D initiative, but they don't have the capacity for each one of those employees to do it. So they need outside support from a vendor, and a trusted vendor who knows MedTech. They come to
Mm.
Gateway. And then from a capability side, there's a lot of instances where, maybe it's a product development stage. You see a lot of that in the product development stage, across the board from stages. And there's a niche capability that's needed that they don't have internally. So how we partner with our customers is they'll come to us, and we'll really identify what that root cause is, to identify and move that project forward. So
Mm.
we'll be able to utilize one of our engineers, and honestly, if we don't have them, we will go find them. And
Yeah.
we'll bring them onto our team to help provide that support for that project and move that project forward, from a capability standpoint. So those are really the two main reasons and the two main buckets that we play in, but
Yeah.
also the three or four main areas that we're playing in with our clientele as well.
And from a stage perspective or size perspective, what's like a typical client for you? Is it rather the big MedTech companies, and
Yeah.
you help them, or it's medium-sized companies? What's like a typical customer of yours?
So we range from literally your small startup, your early stage startup, and providing some services for them, to the biggest customers and the biggest clientele, the
Mm.
biggest, we call them tier one customers, your biggest tier one customers, in the entire world. So, there's no, from a target aspect. Yes, we stay within our lane. I will say we want
Mm.
to focus on our core and understand our customers and what makes sense. We're not just going to go after something if it doesn't make sense. We're probably going to continue that relationship, but we want to make sure we're doing the right things by our customer and staying in our lane as well. But really, I guess to answer your question, it's, we can partner with the smallest company out there, from the earliest stage startup with just an idea, to the Medtronics and the Strikers of the world.
And I can imagine it also, I mean, fuels both your work. When you're working with a startup, your experience working with bigger companies is super helpful, because, I mean, eventually they want to grow or actually be
Yep.
acquired at some point by one of those bigger companies, and having your knowledge about how those large organizations operate is probably helpful then. And also the other way around, when you help a tier one customer, as you called it, I don't know,
Yep.
integrate a startup,
Yep.
having an understanding of their culture and their processes is probably also helpful.
It really is. Yeah. And I think holistic, it's funny how med techs are the same, but they're different, right? They all kind of follow the same rules and regulations across the industry, but you're dealing with the different cultures of each company as
Mm.
well. And, I have an interesting experience that spreads across two different major med techs, and also, a smaller private equity owned business. And every single one of those cultures have their similarities and their differences. And kind of how I've taken that to Gateway though too is you have to really understand that, and then when you're meeting with your clientele, you have to understand their culture and how they operate, because I think that's an important part, especially being an external vendor and being you know, they are our customer. You have to understand how they operate and how they work, because you can't go in there and do it your way. You have to flex and be, you know, nurturing to their business and understand their business before you really become a really good partner.
Yeah, I do agree. Maybe to take one step back, you already talked about your journey in the beginning, but what sparked your initial interest getting
Yeah.
involved in medical device? Yeah, I mean, there's so. I mean, when you after college, I mean, at some point you could go into any industry. How did you get involved with that industry initially?
That's a really good question. So I was born and raised in Kalamazoo. So, you know, sometimes people are like, "Oh, well, you know, you're in the backyard of Stryker, right? That's how you got into medical devices." I will say it's actually a little different, because although I was born here and I went to school at Michigan State and I played baseball, I got injured there twice. I tore my ACL twice, and you know, so I'm in the operating room as a 18 and 23-year-old kid. And at that point in time, the second time, I really didn't know what I was going to do, and my career had ended at that point in time. And I remember coming out of the operating room and going home, and my parents gave me pictures from
Yeah.
my surgical procedure. And on the bottom, it said Stryker. So the pictures of my knee and the anatomy of my knee, it said Stryker. And I was like, I just kind of thought to myself, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, didn't really think anything of it. And as I went through my last semester, that following semester, I was trying to identify what I wanted to do. I went and got a job at a digital marketing firm in Chicago. I wanted to live in Chicago, and I did not like it. I'll just say that I did not like it. It wasn't a right fit for me, really. And all I knew is I wanted to live in Chicago. So I started reaching out to some friends, and you know, I was talking to my dad one night and my mom one night, and they were like, "How about you know, you reach out to Jim Heath?" And you know, Jim is a family friend of ours, and at the time he was the president of instruments at Stryker, and he connected me with a you know, a large network within Stryker, both in Chicago, outside of Stryker. So that's really when I understood what Stryker was, and that there was really this sales aspect. And that's really, I set a goal to do that and to join an incredible organization. I didn't know, like, you know, about all the divisions and everything else. Like,
Yeah.
when you think of that, I had no clue. I actually ended up going into endoscopy, which is that little picture that I was talking about, is what I sold. So I sold
Yeah.
visualization, cameras and scopes, and arthroscopy equipment. And that's actually where I got my start in the medtech world with Stryker endoscopy back in 2013. So
And now with like 12 years of experience in the industry, what do you think are like the most important lessons you learned that helped you succeed in sales and marketing?
yeah, gosh, there's so many, and it's sometimes it's hard to pick some, but I would say, you know, there's a question that's always asked, like, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? Um, and I always say that I hate to lose, right? Everyone loves to win, but you learn when you fail, right? You learn when you fail, and you understand what got you there, what needs to change. And you know, it's hard to pinpoint like one specific thing or one specific existence, or not existence, but example. Um, but I think failing is fine. Like, failing, you know, failure is not an option, is not necessarily a thing, especially in the sales and market. Like, you need to try different things. Especially now in today's world, you have to evolve, and you have to evolve constantly. But it's evolving. And one of my previous one of my mentors and previous leaders in one of my organizations at Stryker, he always said, "Fail. If you're going to fail, fail fast.
Yeah.
You know, learn quick, and take a step back, understand, and then move forward." And I think that carried weight for me, because I think when I was in sales, and even working my way up, you know, although I hated failing, sometimes it got in the way of really understanding and kind of being that mature self of yours and like understanding like it's okay, like learn learn from this. And as I continued to grow my career, in my third, fourth, fifth year, and even to now, you start understanding that. Um, so that's one of the biggest things that I would say, from an understanding perspective or just learning perspective, it's okay to do that. Because and you don't want to do it all the time, but you also need to, it needs to be a gut check. Think about it from an athletic or sports standpoint. You know, I'm a Detroit Lions fan. I'm going to bring this back a little bit for like those laypersons, right? It's, your team hasn't lost in 14 weeks or whatever it was. And, they're kind of rolling and they're approaching the playoffs. They don't know what it feels like. And you get a gut check, right? You get a gut check. Okay, I need to refocus. You can get stagnant, right? And I think
Yeah.
those are really good things to learn along the way. And that I certainly learned along the way.
Yeah. Going back a little bit to the time when you were carrying the back and being in medical device sales, what were strategies you were using to
Yeah.
find adopters of your solutions, find customers who, I don't know, were not using Striker products, for example, back then? Did you have anything, your go-to strategy or mix of things? What was your strategy back then?
You know, um, I think the first thing you always have to do is finding some common ground to build a relationship. And what I always try to do is get them out of necessarily their surgical environment. I The coffees for closers thing is kind of a real thing, because if you can sit them down in an environment or at least get 10 to 15 minutes with them, where you can just kind of be yourself and it's not a scrub sink. You don't always get that opportunity, but I also found a lot of success with that. If you can get some time with somebody outside of their typical environment, maybe where they feel not threatened, but they feel where they don't have the time, and you have to kind of get them into an atmosphere where they're really comfortable. That's step one, right? Because that, I think, lays a foundation for you, and you can set some really good relationship building and building that rapport, because then you kind of become a familiar face too. Um, I would say showing up, right? You don't, and I don't want to use the over promise, under deliver thing, but you also have to deliver on what you promise. I remember stepping into, a territory, whether it was whether it was at my first job out of school with Stryker, and you carry it on. It's like, you tell somebody what you're going to do, you do it, and you kind of have to be at their beck and call, and that's fine, because that's going to help build a relationship, build a rapport, and be there for your customers. You have to take care of your customers, like, and then they're going to start coming to you, and then you're going to get the opportunities. You have to be patient. You have to be patient to a certain extent. We're kind of, from a sales aspect, we're kind of built on no patience. You can't have patience. You got to go, 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 which is certainly true. But you have to pick your battles. And you also have to be patient for those really big opportunities, because if you continue to do what you're supposed to do, the good things are going to, the good things are going to happen.
Yes, I mean, any kind of business relationship really is so much trust based, and you have to build
Hmm.
that solid basis of trust. I mean, contracts are one thing, but actually, like anything in the world, really is operating on trust, because
Yep.
no one really wants to have a relationship fall back to the contract level. That's the worst
Yeah.
case, right? It's
Yep.
like trust is everything, and you want to spark that initial foundation of trust and then continue to build on that with continuous reliability
Yep.
and delivering what you promise. And I mean, in an environment where everything is ultimately about patient safety and patient
Yep.
well-being, that's even more important. Any kinds of mistakes can't really be tolerated, because they
Yep.
can have really harmful impacts downstream
I
with
have a really good
patients.
story about that, actually. And this is when I was in sales, with one of the companies, with Medtronic, actually, and we were doing a conversion, with a customer on a product, and um, it was during it was post COVID. Well, post COVID, I guess you could say. I think it was in 2023. Yeah, it was 2020. No, it was 2022. Sorry, 2022. And we are still feeling some supply chain issues like everybody in the industry. And we had just won a contract with them, with one of our customers, and we were actually expanding our contract across multiple product lines. And one of them, we were having severe back order issues, just felt across the country and the world, really, because of raw material shortages and whatnot. And the customer really wanted to move forward, right? Because this was now on contract. We had signed the dotted line, and I remember myself and my manager and one of our regional business development folks on the IDN level, we had a conversation, and I think we all had come to the agreement, like, we have to push the pause button on this. It was going to hurt ourselves from a revenue standpoint, and my quota standpoint and everything else, but we were trying to do what was right by the customer because we weren't ready to support them, and we didn't want to put them in a bind and just take it as like, hey, we want to get your money. Like, we wanted to be a really good partner, and that's the way I approach everything. I would say, but they were so appreciative of that customer. They were like, we move forward with the other two product lines and portfolios, but for that specific portfolio, we need to pause. Let's figure this out together. And it was kind of like an ongoing situation. We continued to build up as we moved forward, but they were so appreciative of that because we were, just honest with them. Like, hey, we're not there quite yet. Like, we're already running into issues, and we're fulfilling a small volume amount at this point in time, but we know we're going to get better. We know our health stages are going to continue to rise. But to better support you and partner with you, we need to push pause right now. And I think that was the best outcome for everybody. And they are still to this day an extremely loyal customer of Medtronic. So that was just one example to kind of
I do
piggyback off of
agree.
what
I
you
mean,
said.
being transparent and honest is such a cheat code somehow, yeah. Because I mean, it's often, and also just saying, okay, we're not good at that, but we are really good at that, yeah.
Yep.
And being honest about things you can deliver and can't deliver, and rather saying, I'd rather not take on that project because I'm not 100% certain I can deliver to the extent you would like us to do that. And that can build a lot of trust, as you mentioned, for further other things down the road. Because the next statement you make where you say we're really good at that, yeah, is really trustworthy because I have seen you say, okay, let's not go forward on another project.
Okay, Med Device folks, picture this. What if you could open up a CRM today and it already contained information for every potential lead for you in the country? And you could narrow down those leads further by looking at billing, location, seniority, so much more. Alpha Sophia is the strategy tool that we wish we had had when we were commercializing a medical device in the US market. But there's nothing stopping you. So visit alphasophia.com and learn more.
Maybe diving a little bit deeper into the sales and marketing world in MedTech. What would you say is like the importance of leveraging data in marketing and sales in MedTech? Maybe also 10 years ago, now in 10 years, and your
I will say
on that.
It's vastly different from when I was first starting off. I will say, I mean, it was kind of, when I was first starting off in my career, you had your data, you had your daily sales, you had your orders, you can kind of follow those trends. But it was a lot of your account control, and it still is. Let's be honest, it's still about account control and your relationship you built. Like, your business, right? Like, you should. But there's a lot of complexities in it, right? I think even from an internal side, like, each individual out there, each rep, yes, they probably know their business, but they also don't necessarily know what's out there now. And I think there's a lot of things and tools and data that's at your fingertips to really lead you in the right direction. I also think you have to understand what it's telling you too. because that's a big piece of it. And I think that's the importance of these really large, companies that have that support, or have that ability to, really dive into the data and then articulate that data to
Mm.
these individuals down to the rep level. And that's, I think, to your question about the mirroring of from a marketing and sales aspect. And but I will say, um, you know, the data can lead you in the right directions, right? And this is where I always say, like, data is a piece of it, because they can
Mm.
lead you and they can help tell you a story, but then that individual person, they have the pen. They're writing the story, right?
Yeah.
Like they're the ones writing the story, so they have to go execute, right? So, they can have all of these different things that gives you those leads, or gives you the lead generation and whatnot, but you have the pen and you have to take control of it. And you have all these things at your fingertips, right? And I've seen people succeed with that. I've seen people fail with those tools, right?
Yeah.
And the tools have become, much more available for a lot of different people, but it's much
Yeah.
like with what
No,
you
no,
offer, right? So
I fully agree. And it's always no tool in the world for no industry. Nothing is like a magic wand where you can just get a tool and then everything
yep,
magically uh, works on its own. It always requires the people actually making those insights actionable and then
yep,
executing on it, and so on. And in the end, those tools are really helpful solutions to help your people focus on the right
yep,
things. When they are in conversations, be really well prepared to use
yes,
those 10 to 15 minutes they might only have in a coffee chat, where they already know as much as possible so that they can utilize them to the best extent. And that could
yep,
be that they don't spend a lot of time about asking questions they could just answer by secondary research, but rather on maybe chatting about last weekend's football game, and then
yeah,
building a personal relationship,
exactly.
because you don't need to spend time on technicalities
Mm-hmm.
or information gathering. You could do otherwise. And I mean, there's this saying in the industry that the holy grail is how you actually get the attention of those busy doctors and then get those 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes with them. And I think where tools can be really helpful to, first of all, yeah, focus your sales and marketing org on the right people, and then freeing up time from all the
Yep.
slack and noise, so that your really capable sales team can use that really valuable time with healthcare providers in the most effective way.
Yep, yep. And the marrying between marketing and sales there is so important. And um, you know, Stryker always says, marketing led, sales driven, and it's so true. And it's so true. And the lines get blurred at some point in time, but um, because they really do go hand in hand, and the partnership between the two is so vitally important, because one group is setting the direction of where we're going, what we're creating, what we're doing from a market aspect, and then you have an extraordinary sales team that's going to deliver and continue
Mm.
to deliver on their numbers. And you know those individuals are really good, and that's across every organization, right? But that's really the importance of it. And if you don't have one or the other, it's a really hard thing to drive business and business growth.
Mm.
Um, and then obviously you have everything else in the quote unquote background, but they also play such a large part about it. And I will say that's one thing that I learned. Um, I started off in the field. I was only ever in the field, and I was 23, 24 years
Mm.
old. Like, you come off the streets, and I have, I'm a salesperson, and I have X product group. Why am I not getting this delivery, or why am I not getting that delivery? You don't really understand the internal, like, and you get frustrated. Um, but as soon as I, continued to move up in my roles, and then I came internally to Stryker. Actually, I was in an operations role, a field service operations role at Stryker. I learned so much in that role. It was something that probably I learned, that I don't want to call it an MBA because it wasn't an MBA,
Mm.
but like, I learned so much more about the business world and the internal business workings. It set me up for everything that I'm
Mm.
doing today. And I didn't know that at that point in time, but I learned so much from an R&D, an operational perspective, your engineering, your manufacturing, quality and regulatory. I mean, I sat on the hot seat in an audit before, and you don't know those things when you're out in the field all the time. You don't
Yeah.
understand the impacts that everyone else is doing for you internally, so that you can go succeed. And I think that really has really changed my mind shift on how I operate, how I work, my understandings of both worlds, because not everybody gets those opportunities to see that. And I took it as an opportunity to learn and grow and really propel myself into the future.
Yeah, I agree. Um, Maybe to synthesize your experience from that time and also your consulting work at the moment. Many of our listeners are commercial leaders of medtech startups or medium and small sized medtech companies. What advice would you give them in the current environment when launching a new product, when launching maybe for the first time on the US market? Is there any top level advice you would give them?
Um, I would say understand the market is huge. I would say, there's a lot of different you, as a leader, whether it's commercial or operational leader, right? In these small businesses and startups, you have to have really good partners externally. Um, and I'm not making, I think there's a lot of different ways you can spin it, and there's a lot of experts out there, but you want to have partners that really understand the medtech landscape. And if you don't have that, your everything's about speed these days, right?
Mm.
Everything's about speed these days, and understanding. And if you have partners that are maybe experts in one but not the other, but they try to be experts in everything, it's not going to be as successful for you. And you want to have speed and mark, because there might be somebody else that's working on something similar that could impact the same specialty that you're working towards, right?
Mm.
So you need to really vet and understand what kind of partners you're working with externally if you don't have that support internally, um, because they're going to help guide, they're going to help consult, but you also have to stay patient too, because there is a process. And understanding and having somebody understand that process, and not necessarily just making a decision to
Mm.
make a decision because that could impact. Make sure that whatever decision you're making at whatever stage of or life cycle of the development, and from a commercialization aspect, it is that it's not going to have so many downstream effects, right? Because if you do that, then you're going to then face the repercussions on the back end, and it could delay you even further and
Mm.
impact you. So it's a mix of staying patient, but also and finding those really good partners, and then also utilizing that speed to move as fast as you can, because it's kind of um, steady Eddie is going to win you, but you got to keep
Mm.
pushing and continue to move the needle, and have those really good external partners that are going to help you get there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Maybe one last closing question. Actually, let's talk about something else before that. Uh, if we look into the future, what do you think are like the most important trends in medtech at the moment in the next couple of years you're seeing?
Well, the biggest trend is consolidation, right?
Mm.
And whether that's at a hospital level, an IDN level, I mean, you're seeing it across the board. Consolidation is king right now. I think you're going to continue to see that here in 2025. Um, there's us at Gateway, we're working on a lot of different things from a consolidation aspect with our clientele, and that's not going to stop.
Mm.
And the bigger companies are going to continue to expand their portfolios by acquiring smaller medtech companies that accomplish that, right? So it's like the food chain.
Yeah.
Everyone's serving a purpose. These small companies are able to move a little bit faster. They're able to do a lot of different things from a red tape perspective
Yeah.
internally and execute, and they're more narrowed focus, and they serve such a purpose because they're going to push the boundaries of these larger med tech companies, and they're going to expand their reach. And then those big companies are going to, take control, and that's not a bad thing. I think that's a great thing, because those startups, they did an outstanding job. It's such a rewarding thing, I think, even to see from our seats, for that company. Like, they executed on what they wanted to do, and they're now serving a purpose, and they're going to integrate into a new company that's going to expand their reach and expand
Yeah.
their customer penetration and their ability to scale their platforms, right? And then even better, those R&D teams are then going to take those products and make them even better with their resources and the ability to do what they can do. And then you think about it down from a downstream perspective, those products are going to be even better when they're used on, my mother, my father, my sister, my wife, my kids, and, our family members. And so I think that's the way I look at it. And I get excited and energized by it, because I think it's such a cool thing. And I'm a med tech junkie. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to it. I love seeing these things and the impact that it's going to have. But I guess that's a long-winded answer to talk about the trends. But I think that's one thing. And I also think it's really fun, because Gateway, that's like, we provide that services, right? Like, we're able to help bring those new companies in and make sure that they're set up for success with those new companies, for a better future. So,
and it's a constant stream. I mean, as we talk, there's a new medtech startup being founded. There's probably one being acquired today somewhere in the world. It's a constant. It's basically an ecosystem where every participant serves a kind of purpose. I mean, you mentioned the larger organizations are maybe a little bit slower, but they have that platform where they can just roll out something nationwide, bring it into every hospital, every practice, and so on. So I think, it's basically an ecosystem where everything fits together. And from the work we are doing, we're also seeing that consolidation when it comes to practices being bought up by practice groups, hospitals merging, and so on. So it seems like this is going to continue over the next couple of years.
Well, think about it from your perspective, though, too. Like, you go back to the data question, you go back to that data question. You might, you're a new rep. You might not necessarily know any of that information, and you might go from maybe it's a independent group that is performing it, or they're practicing at a lot of different hospitals in the area or regionally, and they get bought up. Like, that group gets bought up by an IDN in your territory, and they're now going to be practicing and performing surgical procedures, or maybe it's pharmaceutical, whatever it might be. But they're then going to somebody who maybe you weren't on contract with, to now somebody you are on contract with, and you don't necessarily know that, but you don't know what procedures they're performing, and there's a lot of different data points that you can gather from that. And that's kind of where I go, like, it's a human element, because there's a mix between the human element and the person and the data that they're being fed, but it can create so much opportunity, right? But if you don't know what's ahead of you, and you kind of don't know the background, or what procedures are they performing, all right? What are they doing? How does that affect me? What are my products? Can my products do this in the way that it's appropriate? Like, but even from a market intelligence standpoint, like, marketing teams utilizing that as well, it's so crucial.
I agree. I do agree.
Yeah.
Maybe one last closing question. What's going to be your focus with Gateway over the course of the next couple of months, years?
Yeah. So, we kind of have, our near term, kind of our midterm and long term goals, right? We are in a really fun spot of growth, I will say. We are doing some really good things. We have some really good clients that we're working with. And we're kind of at this point where we're expanding with those clients, and how we can continue to serve them and be really good partners, trusted partners, right? We're through the first, call it, two years of Gateway. We had 2023 Gateway, we had 2024 Gateway. We're now on the 2025 Gateway, and every year has looked different, right? We're at this point of expansion. We did we did a ton of work last year on building the brand, completing our true first projects, call it, and beefing up our teams, our valuable team members that really create our brand. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And it's really continuous efforts to get the name out there. And I mean, building those relationships, building those trusts, like I would say, that's always a constant. Going and expanding after new projects that we're working on, with opportunities to support, whether it's capability or capacity, really finding that and marrying those together. And also, we're building out our trust with our customers. So it's like we're getting more and more opportunities against our larger competitors that are in the space today, which I think is a lot of fun. And we're getting a seat at the table, whether it's through relationships, through people that we just started working with. We're getting those opportunities. And I would say long term, we want to continue to grow across the medtech landscape, right? Like, we have a subset of clients, and we're still, a smaller company in reality, especially when you compare us to some of the competitors that we're facing. But that's not going to stop us from going after some of the largest clients in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I would say our ability to, one, scale as a company to support those companies is always a question that we might get, but we've proven that we can do that at a really good clip. Executing on projects and the delivery aspect. Mike, our founder, and managing director of delivery operations, is a really good leader, and he does a really good job, and he is a mastermind from an engineering aspect. And he's kind of a generalist, I call him, and he calls it himself, but he has so much knowledge from an industry standpoint that it's so valuable. And then we have our team members that each one of them brings something different to the table. And when we go out and look for somebody to support new projects, we want them to be tenured and that they can step in from day one and run projects, right? And deliver excellence. And we know that when we go partner with, the next big tier one that we're going to partner with, that it's going to go smoothly, and you continue to gain that traction. And, our goal is to be the number one med tech consulting firm in the world. Like, that is our goal. And, we're a small company from Michigan, but that's what we want to be known as. And that could be from a tier one. We could support a contract manufacturer. We could, support a supplier building PCBA boards. There's a lot of different things you can do, and startups and local startups. There's so many different areas that you can support, and it's a large ecosystem, and it's a large pool of potential clients and customers. And we want to be able to stay core to ourselves, but also be able to provide to everyone in this world that needs it.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like an exciting year ahead and an exciting couple of years ahead. And I want to wish you the best of success on your journey.
Absolutely.
And looking forward to maybe welcome you back at some point in a year or 2 years, and then hearing how Gateway has developed. Jared, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Simple question. Can you afford to have a rep in every county, or do you need to be hyper-targeted in your outreach? Do you need to know information about your targets going in to be successful, or do you have years and years before you want to close that deal? If you want to be focused, if you want to deliver fast, you should visit alphasophia.com and help your sales team out.